Hello and welcome to a new Mod Showcase episode on Kerbal Space Program. This episode deals with a modification that addresses a shortcoming of the stock game. As the name of the mod Deadly Reentry suggests, it's all about re-entry into atmospheres of planets and moons. In KSP, the heat generated by friction is indeed shown by graphical effects, but this will not cause any damage to modules, meaning any spacecraft will survive any re-entry angle, no matter velocity. This modification will change that, so stay tuned. After installing the mod Deadly Reentry, there are new modules to choose from. In addition, all values of heat tolerance of standard modules have been revised. If we compare, for example, the MK12 pod, we see a significantly reduced maximum temperature. This pattern continues for other modules like Sputnik or fuel tanks, which, should they survive re-entry, must be protected. The actual features of the mod are very simple. When an object gets in contact with an atmosphere, the friction and thus resulting heat value is determined. If you click on a module with the right mouse button, the current temperature is shown. It gets updated in real time. Once the object nears maximum heat tolerance, it gets damaged, catches fire and is eventually destroyed. The modification includes new modules in the form of heat shields, which absorb incoming heat. If we put a heat shield in front of this fuel tank, the temperature rises significantly less than without, and won't exceed its maximum tolerance value and thus survive re-entry. Most heat shields have another property, which is called ablative shielding. This means that a surface slowly evaporates when exposed to heat, which deflects the heat but also consumes material. Each heat shield has a fixed value, which is reduced depending on length and load on re-entry. Once the value reaches zero, the protection is gone. This property becomes especially relevant if you want to use reusable spacecraft. Designs should incorporate replaceable heat shields in this case. We can use the shortcut Alt, D and R to open the debugging menu and configure different values of the mod. If you want to increase the difficulty, for example, the creator of the mod recommends changing the shockwave values, as well as loading a modified configuration file of heat shields, which can be found in the appropriate forum thread. If we use other modifications like RSS, we can configure Deadly Reentry to match the new requirements to achieve the desired balance. In this example we compare re-entry of a Mk12 capsule with a heat shield on the left and without one on the right side. The capsule hits the atmosphere at about 68 kilometers. The friction and generated heat only really become noticeable at about 40. Clicking on a module with the right mouse button lets us track the increasing temperature. At a certain point the graphical representation of the hot plasma kicks in. The comparison shows very clearly how the protected capsule does heat up significantly less. The heat tolerance in our example is about 1700 degrees. Once we come close to the limit, the modules take damage and eventually get destroyed. In the next example we compare the effect of re-entry on a very large object, using the inflatable heat shield to show the impact of re-entry heat between protected and exposed sections of the craft. We can visibly see how unprotected parts of a craft behave differently than protected parts and how the model responds dynamically to changes. The attached parts are simulated individually. Once they reach their maximum heat tolerance, they get destroyed without damaging the entire object. Conversely, we cannot assume that an entire spacecraft is protected just because we shield a part of it. With the next example we want to make something clear. Heat shields don't make invulnerable. They do reduce heat on the protected modules, but the stress can still become so high that, conversely to the stock game, modules will be destroyed. Here we approach Kerbal at an extreme angle, emerging from a lunar orbit and hitting the atmosphere directly. Regardless of the Kerbal dying of extreme G-forces, the heat exceeds the tolerance value of the modules and this leads to destruction of protected parts. The last example deals with so-called shuttle analogs, meaning spaceplanes that can survive re-entry. Heat shields don't get attached separately, they are simulated as part of a module. The re-entry procedure is as follows. The vehicle is set on re-entry course, the protective surface is aligned in flight direction. Then the craft is stabilized with the SAS system. Once we reach the low atmosphere, we reassume aerodynamic flight. The video description provides more information and links to the mod.